Greetings all, I'm Tarah Wheeler Van Vlack. Welcome to this week of Tarah Talks. This week I'm going to talk about how to start your own tech consultancy and a little bit more about why you would start your own tech consultancy. So as we're going through and doing this, please always feel free to ask questions using the Q&A application here in Hangouts. You can also tweet me at @Tarah. I look forward to having a chance to talk with you all this week. So let's get started. What is a technical consultancy? Why would you start one? And especially, what are the benefits of doing so? So let's talk a little bit more about it. I'm going to talk about three things this week. The three things I'm going to cover, first is how, second is who, and third is why. So let's just jump straight in so that the people who are here for the logistics can get going. The first thing that you need to know is how to start your own consultancy. There's very little that you actually need to start your own business. I think a lot of people are really scared by the notion of having their own company. They feel like it's very complex, like they'll need to hire a lot of attorneys and lawyers and accountants and such like. That's actually not true. It's true that it's very easy to start your own company in almost any state in the US. And I'm given to understand it's very easy in Canada and New Zealand as well, although a little more problematic in Mexico. So why would people start their own tech consultancy? And we're going to cover this later, but the reason for it is because it's so easy. I'm going to recommend that you, first of all, come up with a name for your company. You're doing this so that you have something that you can do for branding. And you're going to leave branding until later. Here's what you need to do to start your company. You're going to come up with a name that is vaguely related to what it is that you do or don't want to do. Imagine that you're going to start a company that we're going to call Blue Sun Consulting. Sup, Joss Whedon. So Blue Sun Consulting is going to be your brand new LLC. It's going to be the vehicle through which you're going to accept consulting fees, the thing that you're going to use to write business meals off your taxes, stuff like that. So if you're going to form Blue Sun Consulting, the first thing that you need to do is check to make sure whether or not that name has been used before. So on your name, go to TESS, T-E-S-S, which is a trademark electronic search service that is hosted by the USPTO, the U.S. Patent and Trade Office. If Blue Sun Consulting doesn't exist anywhere, then chances are pretty good that you're going to be okay with getting a trademark on it. Now, the trademark, you're going to leave until later, but you want to leave yourself open to getting what you need later. So now that you know that Blue Sun Consulting doesn't exist anywhere in the trademark database, you're going to check to find out whether or not you can get the Twitter handle, the Facebook handle, the LinkedIn company, and the domain name .com. So the reason you're doing this, again, is for later on, for purposes of branding. You don't know what you're going to do with this company, but here's how to set yourself up right. So go and get the Twitter handle, the Facebook handle, every one of the services you might want to use. If you are someone who's going to be doing something like graphic design, you probably want to have the Instagram or the Pinterest handle as well, especially since those are the more visual sites that people share things on. Now that you have those things, set them to a good password, throw away and forget about them. You're not going to pay attention to them until later on if it's necessary to do so. I, for instance, have Red Queen Technologies, which is a company that I use to accept consulting fees and all of the same thing that I'm telling you how to do right now. And I have related and associated social media handles, everything like that. The next thing you're going to do is make sure that the .com name for your site is available. There's a reason for this. Even though people like to think that they're all the new top-level domains that are out there, the truth is most people still think in terms of .com. And as a result, the first thing people are going to try to do is they're going to type in something like bluesunconsulting.com to see if they can find you. The Google search better pull up your company. And if it doesn't, it better take you straight to your company. I actually have Red Queen Tech instead of Red Queen Technologies. And that's maybe not the greatest choice. It's not what I would do in the future. I would instead have redqueentechnologies.com. In fact, I might go check and see if that's available. Nobody steal that from me. Okay, so now that you've got your domain name figured out, what's the next thing you need? You need a website. If you're here, you probably already know how to get at least some degree of a website set up someplace. It's going to cost you about $12 for your domain name and probably not a whole lot for hosting someplace. So if you need help with that and how to set up a basic website, that's beyond the scope of this conversation, and you can find a lot better help elsewhere for that. The next thing that you're going to need is cards. You're going to get business cards. You're going to put your name, your phone number, and your email at your new domain on your business cards. Don't worry about your logo yet. Just use a decent type. You're not worried about branding, your logo, or anything like that yet. Although Blue Sun Consulting does seem to have a pretty damn easy to figure out logo, you're going to make it blue sun. You know, you don't necessarily want to commit yourself right away if you have something that's going to be a complex image to represent. If you were, for instance, going to try to create some kind of melange of Eastern imagery and that sort of thing as your logo, that's a little complex for the moment. So stick to the simple stuff. So what we have here is you need a domain, you need a website, you need your cards, and now you need to get your LLC. In Washington State, an LLC costs $180 to file. The only thing that you get from that is a UBI, Universal Business Identifier. Think of that as sort of like the state version of a Social Security number. Your UBI is what identifies your company to Washington State or any other state as a unique individual. That's all you've got to do. Now you own a company in your state. Now there's an extra little step in here that they don't really tell you about. And these are the only two things that you need to do to have a functioning entity right now. You need to go to irs.gov and file to get an EIN for your LLC. The EIN is the Employer Identification Number. This is the Social Security number for your business. You treat it as such. Don't publish it anywhere in public, although I'm sure everybody's got it already anyway. So the EIN is the thing that lets you enter your business in for federal tax withdrawals and such. So if you need to do something like pay for a business dinner for a client, your EIN is going to be the thing that lets you write it off on your taxes. All right. So a lot of people are really nervous about the notion of starting a business. Everything I just told you to do, that's it. Get a domain, get a website, get business cards, and get your LLC. I tell you to get an LLC as opposed to a sole proprietorship or an S corp for two reasons. First, a sole proprietorship doesn't have any shield or any ability to write stuff off on your taxes, and an LLC does, even though it's a pass-through entity. A pass-through entity is an entity that is reflected on your personal taxes. It's a little bit more complex than that, but at least with an LLC, you have some liability protection. That's important to do. It basically means it'd be very difficult for somebody to get through the LLC to get to you personally in your finances. It's possible, though, in a way that it's not possible with a corporation. Not an S corp, but a C corp. C corp is a big corp. An S corp is just you as a corporation. Now, an S corp is a pain in the butt to get set up. An LLC is 5 minutes on the Washington State Secretary of State's website. An S corp is going to require things like minutes and quarterly meetings and board members and things like that. You don't want to mess with that right now. All you need to have a business, LLC, and an EIN. That's all you have to do. And a quick recommendation, if you're going to go to the irs.gov website and you can, dial the number instead and have them give you your EIN over the phone if you can, because their site is horrible. Don't do it. I've filed probably 10 EINs at this point. Much easier to get on hold for 2 hours or so with the IRS and just, sit your phone to the side of you. And when someone says, hello, let me help you, then you're good to go. Work on something else at the time. You'll spend way less time doing it that way, even though you've got concurrent tasks going on. Okay, so that is how to do it. The second thing we're going to talk about is the notion of who you're going to use this for. If you are just now getting started on the notion of a tech consultancy, what you're probably in a situation of is you've got a couple of jobs under your belt and you're looking to figure out if you could strike out on your own. Maybe you want to be a freelance graphic designer or somebody who runs a mini server farm for friends, family, or some specific grade clients. And if you're that person, awesome. Here's what you do to get started with who is going to be using your consultancy. You start with family and friends and you do stuff for free. This does not mean that you don't have to write or that you cannot write stuff off on your taxes. The reason, and it's often unspoken, which is kind of crazy, the reason people file consultancies and have their own businesses is because it provides you with the ability to write off expenses that are related to your business that you would not otherwise have had the ability to write off. So again, if you own your own company and you have a web server that you use to collect money from people for hosting their websites, you transfer or you create a new web server under the name of your company. And then an expense that you would have paid taxes on as a personal expense has now become a business expense, and it's a write-off on your taxes. This is the reason why we do this. It's ethical, it's legal, it's the reason that this is set up this way to make it easy for small business owners to get started. So what you're doing now is you're creating some websites or hosting some server farms or doing some management consulting for friends and family. And you're getting a couple of testimonials up there. If you need help finding clients for your consultancy, then that's a little bit beyond the scope of this as well. But this is a quick way on how to get started. After that, you'll want to file with a couple of freelance sites and start putting your work up on Elance and Odesk, such like that, so that you can start getting a good reputation going. Okay, so that is who you're going to go and target. The final thing that we're going to do now is talk more about why we do this. I already gave you kind of a little bit of a spoiler as to why people file an LLC and use a consultancy. For instance, you could do things like write off your own educational development. Because I do client meetings and I get business at conferences, that means that conferences that I would have tried to pay for personally now are something that I write off as a business expense, which is, again, legal, ethical, and appropriate. It's how you get a small business going. So that's the reason why we do it on a financial level. Why do we do it on a personal level, on a professional level? The first reason professionally is because you need to have a way to cover gaps in your resume. I have been solidly employed for the last 13 years by my own tech consultancy. And the reason that I did that was because I always had this vehicle to accept payments, to do business if I wanted to, that doesn't fall under the category of something else. And also because it shows that I have held a job for the last 13 years. It's my own job, but it's still a job that I've held for the last 13 years. I've committed to something and shown that I can do it long term. That's a good thing to have on your resume. And at this point, it's getting closer and closer to expected at a certain level in technology. So that's why we do it on a professional level. It shows that we have that, and also means that under the heading of your business, you can teach yourself skills, attend conferences, do things like speaking engagements and panels and such. And what that means is you can direct your consultancy in the way that you want to expand your career skills as you get other paying jobs. I have used my tech consultancy to do things like take myself to management classes. And as a result, that means that I get other contractual gigs in management. I accept them through Red Queen Technologies. So that's kind of how this all works. And again, it's a lot easier than it seems, and it's supposed to be that way. This is one place where the federal government's doing a solid job making sure that you can create your own company. The next thing that you do that for is not just your career, but also as a form of protection. I have known people who, and I don't do this myself, who actually run everything through their LLCs, and they pay workers' comp through their LLCs. You can choose to do that if you wish. You can choose to pay workers' comp and opt for that and protect yourself via workers' comp. I don't usually see that many people in technology so out of work for so long that that payment makes sense. But I also see people using this as a vehicle to make sure that they have consistent long-term insurance, both health, life, that kind of thing. Auto insurance, a lot of people will purchase blanket policies through their company and cover themselves as an employee of that company. And the reason a lot of people do that is for dependents, spouses, family, stuff like that. It often makes a great deal of sense for some folks who have a lot of dependents to have some form of guaranteed long-term blanket and umbrella coverage, and you can simply file for that right through your company. So those are some of the main reasons why on a financial and a career and a personal level, why you might do something like this. And so one of the things that I'm going to do now, and I've got several questions, wow, gracious, already lined up for the question and answer period, but the last thing that I'm going to do is tell you that this is one of the best ways I can think of to make sure that you're able to direct your own personal and professional development. You can use this like Madonna uses brand new albums to rebrand yourself if you desire. And it's a great way to provide that kind of experience and that kind of help for yourself throughout your career to show that you're able to do stuff. A lot of people want to see that you've got ideas, that you're pushing forward, pushing on the boundaries and helping to make your career a better place to be for you. Okay. I have a fat list of questions. I'm going to go ahead and check over here on Twitter real quick and make sure that we don't have any that are waiting for me already. All righty. So one of the, again, you can ask me in the QA here or on Twitter as well. So the first question that I got, and I got this one via email, and I already partially answered it a little bit, is how is this possibly legal? To do things like write off business dinners and client dinners. Well, first of all, that's what this vehicle of an LLC, a limited liability company, or starting your company is for. It's specifically so that you can use the tax code to benefit your small business. You're becoming a small business. This isn't intended to be something that lets you cheat on your taxes or do something wrong. No, you're using the incentives that the US government has created for you to create your own business and to cut yourself up by your bootstraps if you can. So not only is it legal, it's ethical. And I will remind you also that Thomas Jefferson said that it is every citizen's duty to pay as small amount in taxes as it is possible for them to do. The reason for that is because Jefferson, like so many other people, believed that it was important for us to keep the money that we had and use it to the best possible advantage for ourselves, our homes, our families, and our businesses. So ethical, and a founding father said you can do it, so you're good. So the next thing we've got here is a question about accounting. Very good question. This is a big warning sign for you. And it was a question specifically about won't you get audited by the IRS more often if you do something like this. I've never been audited by the IRS, and I'm not particularly afraid of it because I have a good accountant and a good bookkeeper. If you're going to do this and you're going to accept money, it's going to become kind of your long-term form of income. You need to get a very solid bookkeeper and accountant. And one thing to remember, and I say this every single time I talk to you folks about 1099 contracts and tech consulting, is this: whatever amount you think you are making on your 1099, cut it in half. Immediately cut it in half. Take half of that money and set it aside for taxes and for handling your FICA, your employment tax, your Social Security tax, your you'll have associated and sundry taxes like business licensing, and there's an awesome little surprise that's going to pop up on you in several states, like Washington State, which charges something like a 1 point something or 2% excise tax. And if you end up at the end of the year not knowing that you have a magical and awesome $4,000 to $20,000 tax bill from Washington State or any other state in the union at the end of the year, the accountant's like, oh yeah, didn't you know about that? You should probably have money set aside for that. And don't forget something else. You're paying taxes on you existing as an employee of your company. That doesn't mean that you've paid your personal taxes. That means you've paid your company taxes. So a very good estimate for how much you're actually making on a 1099 contract is somewhere around a quarter to a third of the hourly amount that you're actually being paid. And at the end of the year, you may end up with a refund, but you're unlikely to. You're actually cutting that a little bit close. So what you end up doing, and the fastest and easiest way to do it, is do all of your invoicing through a bookkeeper to any of the companies that you're going to be working with or any of the people that you're going to be working with. Then just have your bookkeeper handle the process for you. A good bookkeeper handling invoicing a couple times a month for a company and depositing that money for you and making sure that money's going into a tax account is not going to cost you more than $50 to $100 a month to manage all of the expenses for your small LLC. That is beyond worth it. And it means that at the end of the year, the accountant is much cheaper. So that's the secret to making sure that your finances work out for a tech consultancy like that. So yes, I'm not worried about the IRS because I'm totally, completely, and as humanly possible, scrupulously honest on my taxes. Don't ever not be honest on your taxes. Just tell your bookkeeper and your accountant, withhold everything you need to, make sure that I'm honest and just give them what they want, because having done it that way, I think the IRS can just sort of magically, like, they've got like a sniff test for LLCs that smell bad. And my LLC doesn't smell bad. It's clear and it's open. Here's the amount that I brought in. Here's the invoices to back it up. Here's the amount for taxes. Just take it. And as a result, I don't get in trouble for things like claiming part of my home as my home office, because it actually is, or claiming part of my internet bill for business purposes, because it is. So those are often what they call warning signs. They're not that bad of warning signs if you are honest about the way that you're running your business. So there's a really good question about the IRS, actually, and I was concerned about that too. Worry less about the IRS and worry more about weird and hidden state taxes that you don't know about. You could end up finding yourself owing a gigantic sales tax bill at the end of the year that you don't know about. That's closely related to an excise bill in Washington State, but that's for services as opposed to sales of product and goods. So yeah, worry about the states, not about the federal government. The federal government's not going to come after you unless you do something wildly screwy. The states you get in trouble with because they don't tell you what you're responsible for, and then magically you get letters out of the middle of nowhere saying, by the way. So watch out for that. The next question we have here, this is a very good question, actually. It is, when do I start to worry about the branding for my LLC, for my tech consultancy? The answer to that is when people can't find you to pay you, that's when you worry about it. As a consulting company, you are not really, you're not shipping a product. You are probably hiring yourself out to do hourly temporary gigs. And as a result, what you end up doing is you don't have to worry as much about how you're branded. You're more worried that people can find you on Twitter. So, and this is a place where it's going to be a little bit about your own judgment. I found, and this is about 2 or 3 years ago, that splitting my brand was more of a problem than it was worth. I recognized that my personal handle, you can actually see it right there, at Tarah, is really, I want everybody to be able to get a hold of me in one place. And then I can kind of move them over into the direction that I want them to. No one cares what the brand or the logo for my company, Red Queen Technologies, is. No one gives a damn. They're going to hire me or not, and it's not based around whether or not the logo or even the website is pretty. Although really, I should update that website a little bit. All right. I can't call myself a web developer anymore. If I don't have that thing, I think, polished up a little bit. So yeah, don't worry about your branding as much. The reason that you have the Twitter handle, the Facebook handle, stuff like that, is because if you end up getting a big client base and you want to sell it one day, you've created a little extra value for your company at zero cost for yourself, and you've prevented someone else from occupying the same namespace if you do want to trademark. Imagine perhaps that you did want to start shipping a product through that company rather than forming a new LLC. Yeah, you would absolutely want to worry about your branding at that point. But when you're on an hourly basis, just make sure that your phone number on your website's right. You're going to be just fine then. So again, you do want to make sure that if you do have people coming to you to hire you, that they can find you. And I tell people that a lot. So I actually shut down a couple of my different online personalities and brands and stuff like that, and I consolidated it all into @Tarah. I would strongly recommend, if you're somebody who does hourly work through your company as opposed to ship a product, that you get it all in one place, because it's more about you than about the quality of a product you're shipping from the company. If it's about a product you're shipping from the company, yeah, you should keep it a little bit more separate. You're going to want to have a Twitter handle and such that you can have someone else manage for you and that kind of stuff as you go forward. So a lot of what we've been talking about today is not really about what you have to do right this second. It's about how to set yourself up for success. A really great guy, I've had him on this show a couple times. His name is Dan Shapiro. He's here in town in Seattle. He's now the CEO of a really cool company called Glowforge, desktop laser cutters. How awesome is that, right? He said something when we were talking on this show a couple of months ago about your side projects. He said, you need to be just as prepared for overwhelming success as you are for failure. And that's been something that's really kind of struck me, and it stayed with me. Being prepared for overwhelming success means that you have to stop and think a little bit about what you want your company to look like in future, and what happens if all of a sudden you just blow up and take off. You're going to have people trying to get to those Twitter handles and domain names. You're going to have people trying to get into your mail servers. You're going to have people who are trying to knock off your product. So it's not about protecting yourself now. It's about leaving yourself room to protect yourself in the future by collecting all of that social media intellectual property for yourself. Okay, so I think that might be all the questions that we have for today, and I am so glad to have seen you folks. I think that we are good to go for next week as well. And next week, I believe we're talking about, I have no idea what we're talking about next week, but it's going to be awesome. I will talk to you all very, very soon. See you next week at 3:30 p.m. Pacific time for another episode of Tarah Talks. Have a lovely day, folks.